So let's go ahead and dive right into the advanced session. So far what we've learned how to do was to import data from Excel. From that we got our customer info table. I also taught you how to create a user table for internal applications that's going to store all of your credentials, user level roles, and then after that we were able to create our views to filter out information from the staff table so that we can have our managers, employees, and then everyone who has access to the data pages. Then we created our authentications based on those views so that we can create that login interface and apply that login interface across all of our data pages. And under data pages, we have 3 different folders. Inside my employee folder, my employees have the ability to add new customers. They also have the ability to view and manage their own customers. So we learned how to set up record level security, or RLS. I also taught you how to stamp records using authentication. So once the user is authenticated and they log in to submit the form, we can automatically grab their ID and stamp it into a different table. And once you have that common value between 2 tables, you now have a relationship between the 2 tables. In other words, if I'm logged in as Jesse and if I add a customer, I can see which one of my employees added that customer to the table. I also taught you that you can have all of your workflows available on the web. So instead of going directly into a table and adding entries, you can actually create a form to add data to the database. In the case of a manager, we can log in and add new employees to the table, but if you want to save on data pages and resources, you can always go directly to your table and add all of your employees. This way you don't really have to build add new employee data page. It saves you on one data page. Just keep that in mind as well, okay? And finally, we have a nice report that allows Walter White to manage all of the employees. We were able to deploy on our Weebly website. Once logged in as either Skylar or Jesse, we can add customers using this form, and we also have the ability as Skylar, 6 or 7 customers that belong to Skylar. Okay, so in today's session, which is our most advanced class, we're going to cover this concept of passing parameters as query string values. And you may not be able to understand everything from today's session, but what I want you to remember is when it comes to passing parameters, all that really means is that you're passing information from your table from one web page to another web page. So you're just passing information from one table and storing that information into a different database table. Okay, so it's like pitching and catching. Pitching and catching, or you have to throw something and to receive it. Okay, and it's going to make a lot more sense once I build out a few of these interfaces. But just remember, all this really means is you're passing information and receiving information from one table and storing information into a different table. Okay, I'm going to repeat that a few times today because I really want you to engrave that into your head that that's all that really means. It's just passing information from the table. Okay, and I don't want you to think that this is a Caspio thing. This is not proprietary to Caspio in any way. Nearly every website that you browse, if they have a database behind the scenes, they are passing information from one web page to another. And I'm going to show you how Amazon does it. And in today's class, we're basically going to recreate what I'm about to show you today on Amazon. Okay, so let's say you're searching for an item, GoPro camera. So this is the search form, and now I'm seeing my results page. Okay, so similar in our example, we have a search form. Imagine I'm searching for a GoPro camera, but we're searching for different data in our report. So you hit search. You see the list of all of your results. So these are my GoPro camera choices, which is essentially the same thing on Amazon. When I click on the details link for this particular camera, what Amazon is doing is they have a 2-tier one-to-many relationship. They have a single product, and for this single product, they have many reviews below. So you will see many reviews. All right, so this is a one-to-many relationship. But also what they have is many comments to a single review. This is why this is a two-tier one-to-many relationship. One product, many reviews. One review, many comments. So if I click on now, let's see if I can find a review that has many comments. Let's try this one here. So let's comment on this review here. And as you can see, unfortunately, this review doesn't have any comments, but if it did, you will be able to see a list of comments underneath this review. And the way this is linked together, it's basically passing information via the URL. And you may not be able to tell if you've never done this before or never understood this from looking at the URL address bar, but every time you see an equal sign in the URL, this typically means that they're passing some information from the database. This value here that you're seeing is stored in the table, and it's being passed in the URL from one web page to another. Okay, and you'll see why they actually pass that information. Once I build that inside our account, you'll know exactly what's happening on Amazon as well. Okay, and all the URL is, the way I like to call it, is a transportation device. It just serves the purpose of grabbing information from the table and transferring that information to a different web page. Okay, so this in a way is a vehicle that passes the information from one page to another. Okay, so now let's go to Caspio and let me show you how in our account we're going to create this same type of workflow. Okay, on my website we have a list of customers. Okay, now let's just say that we wanted to create a project for each one of our customers, because one customer can have many projects. Okay, so ideally what I'd like to do is create a link here that says add view projects for Mercedes. And to do that, what we need to do is we need to go inside our account and edit the report. Click next a few times until we get to the results page. All right, where it says configure properties. So this screen basically is the results page on my website. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert what we call an HTML block. All right, we covered HTML blocks in the basic training session, how we can add headings, if you recall. So if you wanted to have something like add address info or add personal info, but there's another way to use the HTML blocks. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to reposition this block all the way down. Now you can move it anywhere you want, okay? My preference is to move it all the way down. And inside that HTML block, what you need to do is create a basic HTML hyperlink. If you don't know how to write a basic hyperlink using HTML code, you can always go to Google, and just search for HTML hyperlink. You can probably click on the very first link here to get your answer. If you scroll down a little bit, here's the syntax needed to create a basic HTML hyperlink. Copy it, go back to your Caspio account. And there are two ways to do this in Caspio. I'm going to teach you how you can do that using HTML. I think it's a little more helpful to know how to write the hyperlink versus using our little buttons that we have here. If you click on the source button, this is where you add your HTML. So just paste that hyperlink like this. And all the hyperlink is doing, this text that says link text, when you click on this link, it's going to take you to a web page that's in between these quotes. So this is the destination URL. Now if I do something very simple, let's call our link add view projects. But when the user clicks on that text, let's take them to google.com for now and hit finish. Once you create that link, watch what happens on the results page. Every single one of your customers will have this link next to them. Okay? But if you look here in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, once I roll over this hyperlink, you'll see where it's taking me. It's taking me to google.com because that's the destination page that I specified in between the quotes. So when I click on this link, it takes me to google.com. And obviously that's not what I want. I want the user to remain on my website. So ideally what I would like to do is redirect them to a page that's on my website. So let's go back here. And what I'm going to do next is go back to my Weebly account. So inside my Weebly account, I only have 2 pages created, Add New Customer and Manage Customers. If I go to Pages, I'll be able to find those 2 web pages. Now what I want to do is create a new page on my Weebly website to redirect my user to. So I'm going to click on this plus icon, create a standard page. Let's call it View Projects. I don't want to display this page in my navigation menu, so I'm going to hide it. And let's see if I want a header. This banner that you're seeing here, I don't really want a header, so I'm going to remove that and click Done. And I have to publish my page now. Okay, so I'm going to hit Publish. Okay, so now my web page is published. I can go to my website, and I believe, let me just go to Add New Customer. Okay, so it's going to be called viewprojects.html. Okay, so this is the newly created page on my website that I just created in Weebly. I'm going to grab this URL, go back to my Caspio account, edit my report. And let's go back to that HTML block. And inside the HTML block, when you click on the source button, once again, you're going to see that HTML syntax. And instead of going to google.com, I want my users to go to this newly created page on my website. Okay, so let's finish and test this out one more time. Manage code. This is my projects page. Let me find it. Here it is. Refresh. Okay, so right away you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen I have a new destination page. So when I click on this link, it's taking me to my website rather than google.com. Okay, so this is the first step of passing parameters. You have to tell the user what page you want to go to. And in order to do that, you have to create that simple hyperlink. Let me show you a different method of creating a hyperlink. If you don't want to remember how to write that syntax, there's an easier way. I'm going to create one more HTML block, and I'm going to move that next to the one that I created earlier. Okay, and for the second one, I'm just going to call it Add Project, just so we have a bit of a difference between this link and this link here. Now before, what I taught you to do was go to the source and add your HTML here, that hyperlink text. A second method of creating a hyperlink is just to write the text, highlight it, and click on this button here for link. Once you do that, you're going to see this pop-up window, and this is where you're going to paste that URL that you created inside your Weebly or different CMS platform that you're using. And once you click OK, now this text becomes highlighted, and you can actually view the source to see what it looks like in HTML. Essentially, it's the same exact thing as this. It's just 2 different ways of doing it. Okay, so that's one way, just to type out the text, highlight it, click on this button here for link, and then add your destination URL. Okay, so I'm going to delete this since I only need one. Okay, the next step here is, remember how I taught you yesterday or in the intermediate session that we need to stamp our primary key in the related table? So now I need to pass some information from my customer info table, and I need to store that customer ID in the projects table, which I haven't created yet. Okay, because I need to establish that relationship between my customers and their projects. So when you go back to the source, a little bit of syntax is needed here. Okay, what you need to do right before the quotations is add a question mark to initiate the string, and then you have to give your parameter a name. You can call it whatever you want. Okay, the way I do it, if I'm passing customer ID, I will usually just abbreviate that as CID, which stands for customer ID. If I'm passing first name, I'll abbreviate that as FN. Okay. Then you add an equal sign, and then using this button next to source, you can insert whatever field you want to pass from your table. And I want to pass the primary key customer ID. And we're going to pass that as a string. Okay. If you forget how to write this question mark, parameter name, equal sign, and then you add the field, just go to our knowledge base, click on parameters, and then click on parameters as query string values, and you'll find exactly what you need to put in between the quotes. All right, so here is the question mark for the query string, then your parameter name, which I called CID, then there's the equal sign, and then you add the field that you wish to pass to a different web page. Okay, now once you do that inside Caspio, once you configure this correctly and hit finish, and we go back to my website here, Manage Customers, watch what happens in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. You will see something called CID equals 627 because Mercedes, inside my customer info table, her ID is 627. Martin is ID 628. Then we have 629, 630, 31, and 632. It's basically looking at that ID from the table. The moment I click on this link and it takes me to this page, View Projects, you can see how the URL passed that ID. All right, at this point, we are 50% done. Okay, we're halfway done with passing this parameter. Now that we initiated the throw, we now have to receive this value in a different data page. Okay, so we're halfway there. This is essentially how you pass values in the URL. And remember what I said, this really is just a transportation device that's passing 1 or 2 or 3 or however many values you want to pass in the URL. Okay, so now I need to receive this value somewhere. Okay, but before I can do that, I have to create my fourth table here that's going to store my project information. So we're going to set up a new table. And always remember to add your primary key first. So we're going to say project ID. And I'm going to actually turn this into a random ID. Then we're going to have date added. That's always very important. Timestamp. Project title maybe. That can be a text 255. Project description. That can be a text 64,000. Maybe have start date of the project and have an end date. Now another important field in this table that we need to add is customer ID. Because what we're doing here is we're passing the customer ID from the customer info table, we're passing it in the URL, in that transportation device, and now I need to receive that value and store that value inside this table. Okay, but my customer ID field, which is now a foreign key, needs to be turned into an integer. Remember the rules that we learned in the intermediate session. If the primary key is an auto number, and if you want to stamp that ID in a different table, it becomes a foreign key and it needs to be an integer. Let me just explain that really quickly. So let's save this table now and call it TBL projects. Essentially what I'm trying to accomplish here is looking inside this customer info table. Here are all of my customer IDs. But my data type for the customer ID is an auto number. And if it's an auto number and I wish to stamp this ID in a different table, it needs to be turned into an integer. So really all I'm trying to accomplish here is to pass this value in the URL, let's say 1, 2, or 3 for these customers, and store that value inside the projects table. And it's going to stamp it right here once it's received. Now let me show you how to do this. It's a lot of fun, okay? So let's go to Data Pages. And under Employees folder, I want my employees to be able to add new projects. for each one of their customers. So I'm going to set up a brand new data page. And in order to add a project, I will need a submission form. We're going to hit next. I need to build my form based on the projects table. Let's go with the same style, burgundy. And we're going to call this add new project. I'm going to restrict access based on my employee authentication because employees are adding the projects for each one of their customers. And I'm going to need all of my fields on the web form. Hit next. And let's go ahead and configure this. Project title can be a required field. Project description, usually a text area. Start date, end date are date fields, and customer ID, which for now I will leave it as a text field, even though later on you're going to want to hide that field. But when you're doing your testing, keep it exposed initially just to make sure that that value is received. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as a text field for now. Go to the Advanced tab, and let me now teach you how to configure this part where you can receive that value. Okay, so you're going to check this box to receive value, and all I'm trying to do is receive this value that's passed in the URL. Externally, what external parameters stand for, these are the external parameters that are passed in the URL. So when you see something called external parameter, usually refers to the ones that are passed in the URL. Okay? And you have to call the parameter the same exact way as you passed it. And we passed it as CID. So if you look inside the URL, from that initial link that we created, I called my parameter CID. So if you pass it as a CID, you have to receive it as a CID. You can't throw a football and catch a basketball. Okay, so that's the idea here. And one last thing that I'm going to change here on the next screen, I don't really care to see a confirmation message. I just want the form to refresh. Okay, so when I hit submit, I'm not going to see any kind of a confirmation message. Once done, click on finish. Here is my add new project form. I'm going to deploy this form now to that newly created web page on my Weebly website. So let's go to build. Let's add that embed code. And let's go ahead and paste our code and publish. Okay, let's test it. Let me close this screen. All right, so Skylar is going to search for her customers. And let's go to Mercedes. So I want to add a new project for Mercedes. I'm going to pass the ID 627 when I click on this link. The ID is passed, and you can see how the ID is now received inside this customer ID field. The beauty of this is now when I submit this project to the projects table, let's start the project today, and end of project is maybe 2018. The reason why I said earlier that you would normally hide this field because you don't want somebody to go in here and manually edit this ID. And once we know that the ID is passed in the field, we can go back to the data page and simply just hide that field, which we'll do in just a moment. But the moment you hit submit, the form is going to refresh. What's happening in the database now in our table of projects, you will now see that ID 627 stamped inside the table. At the beginning of the class, that's exactly what I explained. All passing parameters deals with is grabbing information from one table, passing it via the URL, and receiving it in a different database table. Okay, the most difficult part about this is configuring the data pages correctly, but hopefully you understand the concept here, and what's happening is just passing information. That's really all that's happening. And the nice thing about this is now you can really create some fancy applications. If you do master this ability to pass parameters, you know, there's really no limit to how complex your applications can get, because now you can link back and forth between one data page to another, etc. Now let me show you something else that's actually pretty cool. So right after the field that you passed, if you wish to pass another parameter, just add an ampersand here. And let's say we wanted to pass first and last name in the URL. As I said before, if I'm passing first name, I don't really want to type the whole entire parameter. I'll just pass it as fn equal sign, and then I'm going to add my field called first name, and ln for last name equal sign, and then I will add my last name. If you do something like this, for example, and hit finish, and then we go to manage customers again, search. You're welcome, David. Now you'll see when I roll over my hyperlink, now I'm passing the ID, first name, and last name. So when I click on this link, you'll see all that information passed in the URL. Now the reason why sometimes you might want to pass first and last name and some other information, you can also display parameters. This ID is basically feeding into the field. Okay, but if I wanted to display a heading here that says add a project for Mercedes, I can edit my add new project form. And when you get to the configuration screen, you can either enter that inside an HTML block or you can add it to the header and footer. Inside the header, to display the parameter, it's actually the same rule as here. You just grab this. If you forget how to write this parentheses, at symbol, and close parentheses, just copy it, go back to the header, and say something like this. Add new project for, paste that text, but instead of receiving CID, you're basically receiving FN space at symbol LN. And now we'll display the name of that customer in the heading of my form. Okay, so let's go ahead and just test that out. I know that I passed Mercedes Phillips, so if I refresh my add new project form, you will see add new project for Mercedes. If I go to a different customer, say I pass ID number 632, ID is passed, first and last name, and it's displaying Shelly Smith, but it's passing the ID into the field. Okay, so you can either pass information to display it, or you can pass information to store it into a different table. Okay, now that I know that my ID is passed in my field, I can go back to my data page, click edit, and for that field customer ID, instead of leaving it as a text field, I can simply just hide it, click on finish again, and on my form we will no longer see that field. It's still being passed, it's still there, we just don't see it because we don't want the end user to change that data to something else. Okay, now I don't recommend that you pass an auto number. Okay, auto number is very easy to manipulate. I mean, I can just manually go ahead and type in ID number 1, and now if I submit this form, it's actually going into number 1 for customer ID number 1. Even though you see Shelly Smith here, if a user manually changes this in the URL, okay, this is now going to stamp ID number 1 in the projects table. So don't use an auto number. Don't pass an auto number inside the URL. I know I'm doing that in the training session today because auto number is really easy to visualize and understand what's happening. But if you wish to pass something in the URL, making a random ID or a prefixed ID or a GUID as your primary key. So use one of these from our notes. Use either a random ID, prefixed ID, or a GUID. Why? Because when you pass something like that, it's going to look like this. All right? And now if a user tries to change the ID, they're not going to be able to tamper with the data because, you know, it's a randomly generated ID. So it's really hard to decode. Okay? I'm actually going against best practice by passing the auto number. Just keep that in mind. Okay? If you're going to pass some information in the URL, this information is exposed to the end user. So somebody can actually read that in the URL. It's always best to just pass randomly generated IDs so nobody really knows what that ID stands for. Okay? All right. Just wanted to make sure I covered that. We'll go back to 632 here. Actually, you know what? Let me just make sure that I'm passing the right name as well. So we'll go back to Mercedes here. Okay, so then in my table, let's just make sure that in my table of projects, I have some data. I believe that I do. So I passed 627. Let me add a few projects for Mercedes here. So sample, she's 627, sample text, start date, end date, submit. You can refresh your table at any point and you can see how now Mercedes has 2 projects, okay, because we stamped her ID twice inside the projects table. Now what I would like to build next is, now that I can submit my project, I would like to be able to display all of the projects underneath this form. So as I'm adding the projects, I'm able to see them directly underneath my submission form. Okay, and to do something like that, we're going to go back to data pages, and inside the employee folder, I'm going to build a brand new data page. I'm going to go to reports, and let's go into tabular format. I'll select this one here, click next. Based on the projects table, because I'm trying to display the information from the projects table on my website. Okay. Data page name is going to be view projects, burgundy style. Only allow my employees to see this, hit next. And I don't actually need a search form in this case. The reason why is if I submit my project via this form, I don't want to search a form underneath my submission form. I would just like to see my projects as a list directly underneath. So we'll go with the second radio button, allow parameters, and bridge and external parameters. You have to select this radio button because in order for me to view the projects that belong to Mercedes, I have to filter my projects based on the ID that's passed and based on that ID that exists inside the projects table. Okay. Next. How am I filtering the projects? I am filtering the projects based on the customer ID that I passed. Okay, so what that means basically, now that I'm passing customer ID in the URL, I need to display all of the projects that belong to that customer ID. So customer ID is the filtering field, and on this screen is where we need to configure how to filter the criteria. Okay, so we have to go to the Advanced tab. We have to also receive the value here as well in the results page externally. And once again, you want to call it the same exact way, which is CID. So you can see how everything is really linked here by the same parameter name. And the value must be required. This is very important. Okay, the reason why value is required is when you pass the ID in the URL, if I don't pass anything, do not display me any projects for that customer. So something has to be passed in the URL in order for you to view the customer's projects. Okay, so if I pass 627, let's say I pass customer ID 6270. If this customer ID does not exist in the projects table, definitely don't display any information below. But if I do pass the right ID, go ahead and display the projects. That's basically what we mean, but that's what we mean by value required. Okay. If you say if empty, ignore criteria, that basically means if you pass something that doesn't exist, show me everything from the projects table. So let's go back to value required, and then on the next screen you simply set up your results page. What information from the projects table do you want to display? Let's have date added and end date. And let's go ahead and just not have any editing capability here. Let's just go ahead and show 25 projects. Mercedes only has 2. And we're going to say no details page and click finish. So let's go ahead and deploy this data page by grabbing the embed code. And all I'm going to do on that view projects page is add one more embed code underneath my submission form and paste the data page, hit publish. All right, let's test this out. Okay, so I know the Mercedes has 2 projects. I'm going to pass her ID in the URL. My form is receiving it, and my results page is looking at this ID that's passed, and it's filtering the projects based on that customer ID. Okay, so now I can see all of the projects that belong to Mercedes. In fact, you can also add another heading on your report page if you'd like. Let me show you how to do that. View projects. On the results page, you can add a header and footer, and same thing as before. Let's see, we can say, since I passed first name, add FN, something like this. Finish, refresh. Okay, so something on those lines. So you can do things like that. If you're passing information in the URL, you can receive it in the form to display it. You can also receive it in the results page of all of your projects. I will show you the second tier of passing the parameter. We're going to do that quicker this time around, because now that I showed you how to do it slowly, I'm going to show you, once you get the hang of it, how quickly you can actually set something like this up. Okay, no questions. So let's move on. I'm going to teach you now a quicker way of doing this. Now let's say that we wanted to add that second tier, just like Amazon, to be able to now add comments. And I want the employees to add comments for each one of my projects. So once again, what I need to do is go to my data page of View Projects. And we're going to basically repeat the same step. I'm just going to speed this up a little bit. So let's go to our results page of projects, add an HTML block. I'm going to move it all the way down, and I'm going to type out my hyperlink, ahref equals, I'll need to create a page on my Weebly website, and we'll call it add view comments. And I'm going to call that page, let me just go to my website, grab this URL, paste it in here, and I'm going to call that page view comments. Okay, I don't have this page created just yet. Okay, I'm going to create that in just a second, but this time what I would like to do is initiate this string and pass my project ID, which I'm going to abbreviate as PID, equal sign, and I'm going to insert my project ID from the project table. And that's all I'm going to do with this. Okay, so I'm going to hit finish. What that did on my website now, when I refresh this page, you will now see a link next to each project. Okay, add view comments. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, this time I'm not passing customer ID because I passed the customer ID to the project table. This time I'm going to pass the project ID to the comment table. And you can just keep going like that. You can create a chain of passing parameters from one web page to another. So let me go ahead and create this page called View Comments on my website. So we'll go to Pages. No header. Done. Okay, so I need to publish that page so it's live. Very good. It's published now. Let's go back to my account. So now when I refresh my website and I click on that Add View Comments, it should take me to that newly created page called View Comments. There it is. And I'm passing my project ID, which is a random ID. And this is what I said a few minutes ago. Always pass a random ID or a GUID because this is really hard to decode. Nobody really knows what that stands for. Okay, but if you pass something simple like number 1, then yeah, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Okay, so now we need to receive this project ID in the comments table, which I'll need to create next. Okay, so I'll create my primary key first, comment, and we'll turn that into also maybe a random ID or a GUID. It's up to you, so we'll go with random ID. Then I'm going to just list my comment information that I wish to store inside this table. So date submitted, timestamp. Then we can have comment itself. That can be a text 64,000 field. Method, I usually like to have this field called method. You know, think of a drop down. What kind of communication did you have with that customer or that comment? Did I have an email conversation or a phone conversation? And my method field is just a communication method. That's really all it stands for. Now inside this table, you can actually now stamp the employee's ID as well, because if I'm logged in as Skylar or Jesse, and remember what we learned yesterday in the intermediate session, if you're authenticating the form, you can grab the information of the ID from the staff table. Okay, so I could actually stamp the staff ID here. And remember, the staff ID is a random ID, and if it's a random ID, it needs to be text 255 as a foreign key. Okay. And very important here field that I will need is project ID that's being received. And the project ID is also a random ID that's passed in the URL. All right. And if it's a random ID, it needs to be a text 255. And now this is a foreign key. All right. So we're going to save this table. And let's call it TBL comment info. I'm just repeating the same process what I showed you a few minutes ago. It's the same process, I'm just doing it a little bit faster so that you can see how quickly you can accomplish something like this. Okay, there's my comment table. Let's go ahead and build a form that adds a comment. Because I want my employees to be able to comment on each one of these projects. So we have a history of comments and what's going on with that project. So submission form, hit next. Based on the comment table, we'll call it add new comment, burgundy style. I want my employees, because I'm applying my authentication of employees because I want to stamp their ID using the authentication method that we learned in the intermediate session. So now on the next screen, we're going to include all of our fields. Here's my comment. We're going to turn that into a text area. My method, let's move that up above the comment field, and I'm just going to create a quick radio button and say if we had a phone conversation with the customer, maybe an email conversation or other. Comment is my text area. Here's my staff ID. We learned this in the intermediate class. I can now hide this field and grab the authentication value, staff ID, from the staff info table, because as an admin, I would like to be able to see which one of my employees made this comment. And my project ID, which is what we learned a few minutes ago, we have to go to the Advanced tab, receive the value that's being passed in the URL, this value here, and we want to receive that externally, and we passed it as PID. And once again, I'm just going to refresh my comment form, hit finish, and let's go ahead and deploy this form to our website now. Hit deploy, enable access, grab the code. Grab over the embed code, and let's go ahead and paste the code for add comment form. Publish. Okay, let's take a look. So I'm going to search my customers as Skylar. Here's the list of my customers. I'm going to go to her projects. I can add a new project, but I can also comment now on this project called New Project. So if I click on this link, it's going to take me to this page. I'm passing my ID, and my form is receiving that project ID, which I can eventually hide. Let's say we had a phone conversation. Okay, hit submit. All right, so now we submitted this new comment in the table of projects, or comments that is. Let's open it. Excellent, so now you can see how we have a new comment ID. This becomes a primary key that I can now pass to a different table if I want to. We have our date, we have our comment, method, staff ID, so we know which employee submitted this comment. And we have the project ID, so we know that this comment belongs to that project for Mercedes. Very good. So, you know, right away when you do things like this, you can actually go to your relationship screen. When you start passing information from one table to another, if you go to the relationship screen, so yesterday I created this for everyone. So we have our staff, employees that can add customers, but now we have a projects table. that I can add. And the way this projects table is linked is we're basically linking the customer ID that we passed and stamp the customer ID inside the projects table. This is a one-to-many relationship. We're going to hit create. Okay, so now we have this relationship between these two tables, but we also have a comments table that we can join with the projects table, and they are linked via project ID. You can see how quickly this screen can become very messy, especially if you have a lot of tables. But what's nice about it is at least you can see how all of your tables are joined together and where are all the relationships. Okay. Now the next thing that I want to talk about is the views. In the intermediate session, I taught you how to filter data from your table to create your user permissions. Today I'm going to teach you how we can link tables together using common values, and we can build nicer reports out of the linked tables rather than an individual table. What I mean by that is if I try to build my data page report, let's say I want to build a report for the manager, Walter White, to see all of the customers, all of that customer's projects, and all the comments that belong to that project. So if I try to build a report like that, and I come down to reports, let's say we select tabular format. My data source, at the moment, I can only link to one table at a time. So if I try to build a report based on the customer info table, that's great, but it's only showing me the customer information from that table. There's no project information inside that table, and there are no comments stored inside that table. If I try to build my report based on the projects table, that's also great. I can see the project information, but the projects table only stores the customer ID. And unless you have photographic memory, you're not going to be able to memorize all of those customer IDs to know who they belong to. And lastly, if you try to build your report based on the comments table, well, that's storing the project ID, and you're not going to memorize that random ID for every single one of the customers or projects, okay? So how do we actually now build a report that displays information from all three of these tables? Because as you can see under data source, I can only link to one at a time. This is why views are so helpful. When you go to this object and you click on new view, I want to be able to link, let me start off with something very simple here. Let's just go ahead and link customers to their projects. So you're going to move over the customer table and the project table to the right, because those are the two tables that you want to link. And the reason why you can join those two tables now is because we have the customer ID inside this table, and we also have the customer ID inside the projects table because we passed that information via the URL. Okay, so if I start over, this is the main reason why we like to pass parameters from one web page to another. So hit search. We know that this customer ID Mercedes 627 belongs in the customer info table, but when I passed it, I was also storing that table now in the project table. So we have that information in both of these two tables. All right, and if you establish your relationship in the relationship screen, so let me open up this screen one more time. If you go here first to the relationships, and if you join these two tables the way I have here, prior to going to the view is automatically going to give you that relationship between those two tables. If you didn't do this, if you didn't actually link these two tables together in the relationship screen, you will see something that looks like this. And you will have to establish the relationship yourself. It will be completely blank. But if you do establish the relationship in the join and you come to the view and you want to merge those two tables together, it's going to automatically create that join for you. Okay, so really there's no right or wrong way here. If you go to this relationship screen, you can do it there, then you don't have to worry about it here. But if you don't do it at the relationship screen, what you have to do is select your customer ID from the customer info table, because we now have this customer ID inside the projects table as well. Here it is. All right, and when you hit plus icon, there's that same thing that we just looked at a few minutes ago. Okay. So then down here below, you're going to see, do you need to edit data using the view? Unfortunately, it's a bit of a limitation in Caspio. You can only edit one table at a time when you create the view. You can't edit both tables. Okay, so if I want to edit the project info, I can select that table, hit next, and now you get to see all of your fields from both tables. Okay, when you hit finish, here is my view that's merging customers with their projects. Now when I go back to my data pages and click on new here, you go down to reports, tabular, and now my data source, instead of picking one table at a time, customers or projects, I have this view that's a combination of both of these two tables. Okay, so I select that view. Let's give it a name. We'll call it View Manage Customer Projects. Restrict access only to Walter White. And you can have a search for me if you'd like. It's completely up to you. And now what fields do you wish to use in the search form? Well, let's search based on just customer's first name and last name. We learned this in the basic class, so let's just go ahead and select contains, have a keyword search. And now on the results page, you can include whatever fields you want from both of those tables. Okay, so this is the neat thing about building a view. You have a capability to select whatever field you want. So if let's just say I wanted to see all the projects for my states, I can include the state field from the customer info table, and then I will include all the information from the project table up until start and end date. You have some editing capability here. I would like to group all of my projects based on the state in the customer info table, so I will enable data grouping. Let's have a collapsible group. Let's show 25 records at a time, and let's not have a details page, and hit finish. And now a manager has this report that he or she can view. So when I log in, I forgot to apply my burgundy style. That's why you're seeing this blue background behind the login screen. So when I log in as Walter and hit search, I only have 2 projects in the state. Okay, now because I only have 2 projects in the projects table, that's why you're only seeing 2 results here. Okay, but this allows me to at least group my data if I wish to group based on the state field or based on the customer name or any other field for that matter. The last thing that I want to cover in today's class that's very important, once again, it's on the relationship screen. Okay, so if we have this relationship established, let's say between the customers and the projects, and if you click on or double click on this, I want to make sure I cover referential integrity. What this means, if you enable referential integrity between these 2 tables and somebody tries to delete a customer via the web and that customer has linked projects, it's not going to let you delete that customer because you have related data in a different table. Okay, so let me show you. If you enable this checkbox between these 2 tables, customers and projects, okay, and let's just say, let me see if I have it on my website, if I have the delete option enabled for my employees. I don't. So let me go ahead and delete or enable that delete link. So let me edit my report. View manage customers. Here it is. And let's give our employees the ability to do an inline delete. So inline delete, basically when you refresh the report now, you will see this little delete icon next to it. Okay, so I know that Mercedes has 2 linked projects. If I try to delete her now and I have that referential integrity checkbox enabled, it's not going to let me because there's a data integrity restriction. Okay, now also very important to mention under tables, actually I think I have the relationship screen opened up. Let's go ahead and open up that relationship one more time. If you enable cascade delete related records, if you delete the customer and that customer has related projects, it's going to delete all of the entries from the related table as well. So be careful All right, be very, very cautious and careful how you configure your checkboxes for referential integrity. Okay, because if somebody deletes a customer and you have 1,000 related records to that customer, everything will be wiped out from the related table. Okay, cascade delete works the same way as cascade update works the same way as cascade delete. So if I make an update in the customer info table and you're passing some information to the related table, it's going to update all of that information in the related table for all of your related entries. Let me go to my published data page. So we want to add a project for Mercedes. Now you can either add an image somewhere on your website. You know, you upload the image to your own website hosting company, and then you can reference the image and display it. But let me teach you how to display that image in the data page. So let's go to google.com and let's just grab a random logo, about a Caspio logo. All right, and let's go to maybe this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the image location, so copy image address where this image is hosted. Let me just make sure I have the right one. Yeah, so basically all I did was grab the location of the image. This website is hosting Caspio's logo. Okay, so I'm going to grab this link. I'll go back to my Caspio account inside the data pages. Let's add that to the add new project form. And just like the HTML hyperlink, there are two ways to add the image. Let's add it to the header of the form, and we're going to add that image right above this heading, add new project for Mercedes. Okay. Now to add the image, we have this little button here for image. Click on it. Paste a URL, the destination of your image, right over here. As soon as you click outside that box, you will be able to see that logo and what it's going to look like. Now at the moment this logo is a little bit too large for me, so I'm going to resize this to maybe 150 pixels. Okay, it keeps the same constraint to the height. You can set your border if you like. There are a couple of other options here that you can put in, but if you're happy with the size, you hit OK. And here's that image now that's displayed above this heading. When I hit finish, inside my website, I'm going to refresh and I should be able to see that Caspio logo right over there. Okay. I will go ahead and make sure to keep this part in the video for you. One other thing that I do want to show you is a second way of adding an image. So if you don't want to use that button for adding an image, and if you know how to code in HTML, I'll show you a different method. If you click on the source button right over here, to add an image, you just need an image source tag. So image src equals, and in between the quotes is where that image is hosted. And then you can set maybe the border equals 0, because I don't want any kind of border around my image. And width can be 150 pixels, like this. Okay? And basically, I just rewrote what you're seeing over here. Okay, so when I unclick the source button, you're just going to see the same exact thing. You can either do it by typing your own HTML, or you can use the simple WYSIWYG that we have to add that image. Two different ways, just like that HTML hyperlink that we learned how to pass parameters. Okay. Now let's just say we wanted to build a report for the managers, maybe a chart. So I'm going to build a new data page here. Let's go down to charts. And let me think for a second what I would like to do. How about we do a donut chart? In the inner circle, we can display the customer information. And in the outer circle, we can have all of their projects. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to add some data because there's only one Mercedes with 2 projects. So let me see what that's going to look like. And then I'll add some more data. I think this will be a fun one. We're going to base that off of the view. Okay, and then we're going to call that view customers projects. Burgundy style. We're going to restrict that just for Walter White. I don't need to search anything. I'm not going to filter based on anything. Let's see if I can configure this correctly. Just bear with me for a second. View customers projects. Subtitle, no need for a subtitle. I don't need to make any changes here for my category, which is going to be the inner circle. Let's have, okay, usually I concatenate my first and last name normally, but I have it in two separate fields. So I'll just use the last name, which will display Mercedes. In my subcategory, I would like to count the number of projects. So we're going to go with customer ID. And I don't need to format anything here. And for my value, I'm going to grab the sum of the customer ID. Actually, you know what? For the subcategory, I'm going to display the project title. Never mind, project title. And we're going to count how many projects for that customer ID. You can display it as a percentage, or you can just get the total, but let's have it as a percentage. Let me see what this looks like. So let me preview. I may have to make some changes here, but let me see. Okay, so Mercedes Phillips 100%, and she has 2 projects, so it's 50-50, right? Now, if I were to, just for fun, let's just go ahead and add a different project for somebody else. I want to see that chart behavior. So let's go to Martin and add a project here. How about great, I don't care. And let's add 2 more. And okay, so now my chart, I'm not sure, there it is. Let's refresh it. Okay, so we have Phillips and we have Clark, and we can see the distribution between the projects in percentage, right? So 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, that's a full 100%. And in the middle we have Clark has 3 projects, that's why we're seeing 60%, and Mercedes has 2 projects, that's why we're seeing 40%. What's cool about these charts is that if you just wanted to see Clark, you can disable that. If you wanted to see Clark or Phillips, then you can just click on that icon again and it'll display that information. Okay, if you don't want to see percentage, you can just disable that checkbox in the wizard and it's going to show you total number of projects for each one of these customers. This is why charts are very popular and nice. Okay, so I'll keep this in the video as well. I'll keep both the image and also the charts so that you can see how that's configured. But play around with the charts. I definitely recommend it because you can really build some nice analytics and reports based on those charts if you want to see what your data